I remember a conversation that I had with my daughter, Sama. She was about 7 years old at the time. We were on a car journey, a long road trip, and she'd been silent for some time, which was quite unusual for her. And then suddenly she emerged from her reflections and declared, "I hope that when I die, it's because an asteroid hits the planet and that it kills everybody and none of you have to mourn me." I looked back in the rearview mirror and saw her younger sister, Yaffa, sitting beside her and looking not very impressed. And I think it was at that moment she started to doubt the authority of an older sibling. Now, perhaps because I'm also a younger sibling, I kind of doubt that authority myself as well. But I'm wondering about how Sama's words might now be informing the current leaders of the Western world. We're on our way out and we're going to take you with us, but it's for your own sake. Now, during that car journey, and it became quite a long car journey as Yaffa started to really unpack what Sama's words meant for her, I got into thinking about, well, what is the end of the world, really, in their imaginations? Because the end of the world is different than just the destruction of the planet. The destruction of the planet is just death, and as Sama suggested, that could come as something of a reprieve. No, the end of the world might take place and the world still keeps going. We keep still living in it. But that which has made it meaningful and purposeful has come to an end. The end of the world is a dystopia. It's a time when things that were before no longer continue into the present. Everything has been, nothing is becoming, and nothing is belonging. This experience of the end of the world happens every day to people subject to forced migration. Currently, around the world, there are more than 80 million people who experience being displaced as a result of political or economic or natural disasters. They are forced upon the road every 2 seconds. There's a new person who is put upon the road, leaving their families, their friends, their communities, their careers, their lives, and forced to go out and find a new world somewhere. A world that does not continue the meanings that existed before. And this is rapidly increasing. We know that as a result of the climate crisis and the disasters that will flow from that, scientists have predicted that over the next 25 years, up to 1 billion people, by the year 2050, up to 1 billion people will be displaced by climate. And they will come from all diverse parts and corners of the planet. They'll come from every strata of every society. Climate does not discern. And all of us will be encountering very diverse peoples as a result of this climate mobility. So for a child that is born today, the first word that she speaks will probably be in a different language than the last word she hears and understands in her lifetime. During the course of her life, she will experience acculturation at an unprecedented level. Now, of course, humanity has faced migration before, sometimes by force, sometimes by choice. We have left worlds and recreated new worlds through our cultures in new places many, many times over and over millennia. But we have never had to do it at such an unprecedented rate and on such a scale. So what does this mean for the future of culture, of democracy? What sort of competencies will that child need in order to navigate that very uncertain world as she moves between and betwixt different cultures and communities in her lifetime? How will she learn about culture? How will she participate in culture? And how might she learn to generate new forms of culture with the strangers that she encounters in an ethical and pluralistic way? This is one of the most important questions for arts education for the 21st century. Hi, my name is Nicholas Rowe. I'm a UNESCO Chair in Dance and Social Inclusion, and I lead the Horizon Europe project Intracomp, which is looking at climate displacement, cultural democracy, and the role of arts education within that. Now, it's my pleasure to be talking to you here at TEDxBodø. Now, even though I represent, I research the imagination, I could never have possibly imagined being here talking in front of you 33 years ago when I was first in this part of northern Norway. Back then, that was the early 90s. I was a classical ballet dancer. I worked with the Finnish National Ballet. I was in Helsinki. I can remember a Saturday afternoon performance of Giselle. It was a Saturday matinee. I was on stage. It was the first act. I was dancing with my peasant wife. I was a happy little peasant, and she was my happy little peasant wife. And we were scooting across the stage, smiling at each other, smiling across at the prince and the princess who'd come to see our happy little peasant village. And we were smiling back at them, and they were smiling at us. We were all smiling out at the audience. The audience, the Saturday afternoon audience, was smiling back at us. And suddenly I thought, what on earth am I doing with my life? This is ridiculous. This is 19th century pornography, political pornography. We're trying to idealize this sameness. We're all desperately trying to be the same, to value the idea of being more the same than anybody else. And yet when we go off stage, we can barely talk to each other, can't stand each other. But here we're saying sameness is the valuable thing. And it didn't feel right. So I finished that season of Giselle, bought a motorbike, and headed straight out of Helsinki north. I hit the Arctic Sea, realised I'd taken a wrong turn, so came back again down through these beautiful fjords in the north of Norway, headed across Europe, on across the Sahara Desert, and into West Africa. And on this journey, I was feeling, look, I still want to encounter and understand the world through my creative, moving body. But I want to do it in a way that values differences, that is inclusive, that is about equality. I was hungering for dance and democracy. So I saw myself transitioning out of a career as a classical ballet dancer, moving through a career as a contemporary dancer, and then into a space that I found the most rewarding, community dance. In that space, I could work with people and help facilitate the experience of encountering strangers and strangeness and allowing ourselves to regenerate new meanings of what it is to be with these people, to create ethical new roles and responsibilities and relationships in a new vision of what society may be. I found myself increasingly wanting to work in locations of political failure, places in which governments had failed to ensure basic human rights, and it was through moments of community dance, through this experience of democracy amongst peers, that we could really flourish with our creativity. And that took me on an extraordinary odyssey. I traveled across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, the Pacific. Everywhere I was going, seeking different arts organizations, different communities to see how can we get together and just create dances together and see how that makes us feel about each other. Now, you might think that as a result of all of these journeys, I've become really good at languages. Well, I'm not. I'm awful at languages. I love words, I really love words, but I am terrible at languages. I trip on tenses, I slip on genders, I conjugate at inappropriate moments, I coagulate sentences rather than construct them. But with words I really love, and I like to learn a new one every day, and I've got some favourites. One of my favourite words is mishmakul. It's an Arabic word, and it basically translates as inconceivable. And it's a wonderful word for people working with the imagination. But it's also a very complex word, and it's used in very complex ways in Arabic. Mishmakul can be a declaration. Mishmakul can be a question. Mishmakul can be a revelation. And through all of these ways, mishmakul teasingly tempts us to the boundaries of what we can imagine. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm then in a squatters camp in Manila, in the Philippines. It's Maundy Thursday, the day just before Good Friday at Easter. I've been brought there by a theatre organisation that works with the squatters in the camp every year to recreate the Calvario, the Calvary of Christ, through the camp, performing the 14 stations of the cross. Now, this camp is situated on a rubbish dump, and the people live their lives inside the rubbish dump, going through the rubbish, finding bits of rubbish that they can then go and sell and hawk on the streets of Manila. But for 2 weeks before Good Friday, every evening they gather, young people, old people, a large group in a church hall, and we create dances together about the 14 stations of the cross. and they bring things from the rubbish tip. They bring a large piece of tarpaulin they found, and that becomes the tablecloth of the Last Supper. They lash poles together that become crosses and crucifix that they pull on. Their movements aren't that inventive or innovative, but they're deeply personal, and they bounce off each other as they generate these ideas. Now, it's more recently I've learned another word that kind of captures that feeling, mafana. It's a Tongan Samoan word that talks about the enlivened energy that people feel when they're interacting together creatively. And they bounce this sense of mafana off each other. And we felt that as we were generating this performance. So Maundy Thursday, the theatre company comes to have a look at what we've done. The director of the theatre wants to see what we've produced. He watches it all. And he says, no. No, we cannot show this. These people are not suffering. They look like they're having a good time. No, the world's media is coming to see them perform in the camp. They need to see that they are suffering. No, this will not do. And so all of their ideas are shelved. The tarpaulin and such is put away. He summons his people to then teach some sequences that they've done previously, some tortured, agonized postures that are then the next day performed around the camp at each of the stations of the cross, along with a voiced-over loudspeaker saying, look at how much these people are suffering. Now, I understand the intention and the goodwill of the theatre group that was seeking to bring attention to the plight of these people. But in that moment, I awoke to the ethics of creativity. That creativity is political. Choices are made about where creativity can happen, how creativity can happen, who can be creative, and who gets to choose who can be creative. So a few years later, I find myself at the beginning of this new millennium living, working, and eventually marrying in the occupied Palestinian territories, in Ramallah. I work with arts organizations and community centers across the West Bank, Gaza Strip, South Lebanon for 8 years on arts projects inside the refugee camps and the villages. And it might seem, well, underneath this other dystopia, this military occupation, how do people engage with arts? Well, surprisingly well. I was amazed by the amount of arts activity happening across the West Bank and Gaza Strip every time we would go to the camps, by how much parents would want their children to go along and just have this opportunity to engage in something creative. And I wondered, how did this happen? Where does this come from? Because when I look at the circumstances there, I'm not sure that I would have that energy to do this. That brings me to another word, a word that's become perhaps more familiar and understood around the world during the last 2 years of the genocide in Palestine. The word Sumud. Sumud stands as a process of resistance against one of the most brutal and long-standing processes of ethnic cleansing and apartheid that European governments have ever sponsored abroad. Sumud enables people to wake up each morning and challenge the idea that they should be excluded or marginalized or commodified as enemies or victims. Sumud gives people a sense of vision that I actually know I can come up and we're going to generate a new sense of who we are collectively in this space. Now, Sumud is often translated as the word resilience. But we all know resilience is really just a neoliberal code word. No, it stands for government austerity. It justifies government giving neglect. It's kind of a fridge magnet for policymakers. And they like to say, yes, be resilient, keep on suffering on, keep on being exploited, keep on serving the powerful. But is that really, as we look at all of the polycrises around the world, as we look at the asteroids heading towards us, is resilience the best that they can come up with? Is the best idea that a policymaker can give us, suck it up, buttercup? Or are there other ways of dealing with these crises? What do we learn from the Palestinian experience? Well, I recently learned a new translation of Sumud that I think is much more apt. It's like the word resilience, has the same Latin root. It's Transilience. Now, whereas resilience suggests how an organism has to toughen up and grow a hard shell when the environment gets harsh if it wants to continue on, Transilience and Transilience in organisms allow them to adapt, to change, to grow more diverse, complex features so they can thrive and flourish in new environments. And when I look at the Palestinian experience, I say, yes, this is what's happened. This is how they have continued on for so long through Sumud. It's through this continual generation and regeneration of who they are. Now, how have they done that? And how can we all become more transilient as individuals and communities as we face the climate disaster? Well, arts education, creative arts provides us with a space to gather together with strangers and with the strangeness of the world and generate new meanings, new relationships, new understandings of what we are and what we could be. In an ever-ending world, arts and participatory arts allows us to generate a new sense of belonging and being. So that's what we're focusing on within the Intricomp project. How might we bring arts education much more broadly across the world to prepare us for the ravages and problems we're going to face with mass climate displacement? When I look in the rearview mirror and I look back and see Yaffa looking at her sister Sama and thinking about the asteroid and wondering what it means for her, I think in that moment she realized that she doesn't have to just toughen up and face the asteroid with resilience, that she has agency, that she can make choices, that she can imagine and create alternate futures beyond the end of the world. Thank you.